Hello, my name is Carrie Brown and I'm with the Central Mississippi Regional Library System. Today I'm going to be reading to you chapters 1 and 2 of Calendar Mysteries April Adventure, written by Ron Roy, illustrated by John Stephen Gurney, published by Random House, New York. Chapter 1. The Silent Visitor. Bradley Pinto was having a dream. In his dream, he was following a trail of jelly beans. The jelly beans led him into a meadow. The flowers in the meadow were made of lollipops. The trees were sticks of licorice. There was a stream of chocolate milk under whipped cream clouds. Little butterflies made of cotton candy flew by. One landed on Bradley's ear. Just as Bradley was about to drink from the chocolate stream, he woke up. Something had touched his ear. Something real! Bradley opened his eyes in his dark bedroom. He saw a shadowy figure tiptoe toward the door. Then the figure was gone. Bradley put his hand on his pillow, near his ear. Something was there! It was hard and smooth and sort of round. He turned on his lamp and grabbed the object. It was a plastic Easter egg! Bradley's twin brother Brian sat up and squawked from the next bed. "Hey, what are you doing? It's the middle of the night!" Bradley looked at the clock. "No, it's not," he said. "It's 6 a.m, the day before Easter." "Happy Easter, Bradley," Brian said. Then he went back to sleep. Bradley sat up and pulled open the two halves of the plastic egg. Inside, he found a folded note with these words: "Don't wake the grown-ups. Signed, The Shadow." "What's going on?" came another voice. "Morning, Nate," Bradley said, looking down from his bed. Bradley and Brian's two best friends had slept over. Nate Hathaway and Lucy Armstrong were in sleeping bags on the floor. Lucy sat up in her sleeping bag. "What time is it?" she asked as she blinked at the light. Lucy's parents were helping build a school on a Native American reservation in Arizona. She was staying with her older cousin Dink Duncan while they were gone. Dink was best friends with Nate's big sister Ruth Rose and the twins' older brother Josh. In fact, Dink and Ruth Rose were having a sleepover too. They were down the hall in Josh's bedroom. Brian sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Hey, what's this?" he asked. He held up a blue plastic egg. "It was on my pillow." "I found one too," Bradley said, showing his egg. "My egg had a note inside." Brian yanked his egg apart. A folded paper fell out. "Mine does too," he said. Nate and Lucy soon found plastic eggs on their pillows. "We all have notes," Lucy said. "Mine says, 'Go where a rose grows,' signed The Shadow." "Mine says, 'Get dressed,'" Brian said. Nate crawled out of his sleeping bag. "Mine says, 'There you will find directions to the treasure.' It's signed The Shadow, too." "Cool, it's a treasure hunt," Lucy said. "I love treasure hunts. But who's the Shadow?" "Whoever it is, he used a computer," Nate said. "These notes have been printed out." "Josh has a computer in his room," Brian said. "Is your brother Josh the Shadow?" Lucy asked. Brian shrugged. "Maybe. Dink and Ruth Rose slept over last night. I'll bet the three of them cooked up this idea." "But why put the messages inside Easter eggs?" Nate asked. "Because tomorrow is Easter, silly," Bradley said. "Oh, yeah, it is," Nate said. "Happy Easter, guys!" "I think we should do what the notes say and find the treasure," Lucy said. The four kids read their notes again. "Mine tells us to find the directions," Nate said. "How do we find them?" "Go where a rose grows," Lucy said, reading from her paper. "But where's that?" "I know," Nate said. "Over in Center Park there's a rose garden. That's where roses grow." 5 minutes later the kids were in the kitchen pulling on their sneakers. Lucy saw a basket on the kitchen table, a paper napkin covered in something lumpy in the basket. There was a folded paper on top of the napkin. Brian read the note to the other kids. "Eat us. Signed, The Shadow." Bradley lifted off the napkin. Under it were 4 jelly donuts. "Yum! I'm beginning to like The Shadow," Nate said. Chapter 2. An Egg Hunt. Bradley found a pencil and wrote another message on the paper. It said, "Mom, we're at the park. Bradley." The kids hiked down the driveway towards Center Park. Sunlight was peeking over the barn. The leaves on the tall trees were bright green. The three boys munched on their donuts as they walked. Lucy carried the basket holding the fourth donut. "Aren't you going to eat your donut?" Brian asked Lucy. He had finished his and was licking his fingers. "I'm saving mine for later," Lucy said, "so stop staring at it." "I wonder what the treasure will be," Nate said. Bradley laughed. "Knowing Josh, it will be something to eat." "But maybe it wasn't Josh who put the notes inside the eggs," Lucy said. "Then who did?" Brian asked. "Our parents wouldn't do that." "When I first woke up this morning, I saw someone in our room," Bradley said, "sneaking away from my bed." "Who was it?" Brian asked. Bradley shrugged. It was too dark, and he left the room real fast. "Did he hop out of the room like a bunny?" Lucy asked. She had a smile on her lips. Bradley giggled. "No, he glided out like a shadow," he said. The kids crossed Pleasant Street and entered Center Park. The rose garden was inside a white picket fence. Most of the rose bushes had small buds on them. Some had early blossoms. The bushes were planted in a big circle around a fountain. A statue of a fish stood on its tail in the fountain. The fish's open mouth spouted water. On the other side of the rose garden, it was a pond surrounded by bushes and tall grass. In the middle of the pond was a small island with a tree in its center. "Hey guys, look!" Lucy was pointing at a fat raccoon walking out of some bushes near the pond. 3 baby raccoons followed her. They all waddled past the kids and entered a grove of trees. "They are so cute," Lucy said. Just then they heard barking. A man was walking a small white dog through the park. He carried a paper bag in one hand. He stooped over and picked up something from the ground and put it in his bag. Bradley recognized the man. "Hi, Mr. Pocket," he called out. Mr. Pocket waved. "Happy Easter," he shouted. "You too," they all called back. The kids walked through the gate into the rose garden. "Well, this is where a rose grows," Bradley said. "Where do we look?" Brian asked. There were at least 100 rose bushes growing in rows. Between the rows was green grass. "Let's split up," Bradley said. "Each take a row and check out all the bushes." "We don't have to do that," Nate said. "Look!" He was pointing at the fountain. A yellow plastic egg floated in the water. He raced toward the fountain with the others right behind him. Nate got there first. He plucked the egg out of the water. "Open it," Brian said. "It's all wet," Nate said. He wiped the egg on his sweatshirt, then pulled apart the halves. "There's another note," Lucy cried. Nate unfolded the note and read it to the other kids. "There are 11 more plastic eggs. You must find the 4 real eggs to get to the treasure. Signed, The Shadow." Bradley took the note from Nate's fingers. "What does he mean, the real eggs?" he asked. "Real must mean not plastic, like this one," Nate said. He held up the 2 halves of the one they'd found in the fountain. He put them back together and set the egg in Lucy's basket. Brian grinned. "Like fried eggs?" he asked. "Gee, I hope the shadow hid some ketchup. I like ketchup on my eggs." Nate laughed out loud. "You crack me up," he said. "Get it? Crack me up?" "Let's look for the rest of the eggs," Bradley said. Center Park covered a wide area. Inside the park were the rose garden, the pond, and a band shell. The band shell was a little platform with a roof over it. In the summertime, musicians played music on the platform. People would gather on the lawn to listen. A grove of trees grew near the rose garden. Wooden benches had been placed around so people could sit and enjoy the roses. On one side of the park were the high school playing fields. Next to the high school was a meadow, and next to the meadow was the lawn surrounding Green Lawn Elementary School. "How do we find Easter eggs in all this?" Brian asked. "These plastic eggs are bright colors," Lucy said. "We should be able to see them from far away." She had begun eating her jelly donut. Nate climbed onto one of the benches. He looked around. "I don't see any," he said. "Let's just start," Bradley said. "We should each look in a different place. I'll go check out the pond." "I'll search around those trees," Lucy said. "I'll stay here and look around all the roses," Brian said. Okay, I'll snoop around the band shell, Nate said. He wiggled his eyebrows up and down. Sometimes people drop money there. If you find any, you have to share, Brian said. Ha! Nate said as he raced away. Carrying her basket, Lucy took off for the grove of trees. Bradley headed toward the pond. He walked through the tall grass and reeds. He read a sign that said, "Please do not feed the swans." Bradley stepped carefully up to the water's edge. Last summer he had seen a long black snake there, lying in the sun. Josh had told him that snapping turtles lived in the pond too. They came out of the water to lay their eggs. Bradley placed his feet carefully. He didn't want to step on a snake or a turtle. At the edge of the pond, Bradley parted a clump of grass. He peered down at the ground. He saw only rocks and mud and weeds. No bright plastic Easter eggs. Suddenly, Bradley froze. He held his breath. Something was hissing at him. Thank you. Be sure to tune in next week for chapters 3 and 4. Goodbye.